Yeah, look, I get it. They haven't played in a regular season game together yet, right? But look at their body of work so far in their NFL careers. You know, Devonte had a terrific rookie season, had nearly 1,000 yards receiving, was immediately the best skill position player the Eagles had. You know, might have had better numbers if Jalen Hurts had gotten off to a better start and the Eagles actually threw the ball more often in the second half of the season.
Here's Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We'd like you to like the show, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff to keep us rolling. We'll roll to the top of the hour, and then Rick Saratello, who's in for Johnny Mac right now, will take over with his own show. Busy one, got Baldy on, joining him later. But we're lucky enough to have Mike Sielski join us right now from the Philadelphia Inquirer and 94 WIP. MS. You think the Eagles shouldn't even put a punt returner back there? Did you really write that column? Screw the punt returners. Just play 11 on the line.
First of all, Jody, it's nice to see you. Happy Friday morning.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Rick.
Happy Football Friday, Mike.
So, as I said on the radio the other day to someone else, sometimes as a columnist, you write a piece for the simple purpose of making people think, to kind of push the envelope on what's considered conventional thinking, I guess. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that it wouldn't be such a terrible idea if the Eagles went without a punt returner. Now, look, as I said in the column, if they had a Deshaun Jackson or a Darren Sproles or a Brian Westbrook or a Brian Mitchell on the roster, a player who was not only an exceptional punt returner, but who filled a very important role apart from returning punts, I wouldn't be making this argument, okay? But they don't have a guy like that. They're going to have probably, Britton Covey, who's a marginal NFL player, performing this job. And it could come back to bite them. And there is a school of thinking that, look, when you force an opposing offense to punt, that offense is surrendering. They're saying, we give up. We are giving you the ball back. Just take it. Just take it. Don't run the risk of muffing the punt, fumbling the punt, making these kinds of mistakes that could and have in the past harm the Eagles. You only have to think back to last season's playoff game against the Buccaneers, where Jalen Reagor fumbled one punt and it led to a Buccaneers touchdown and then dropped another one later in the game. So again, it was as much a thought exercise as it was anything else, but I do think there's merit to the idea.
Well, Mike, what you just said is echoing my sentiment as to why the Eagles should maybe kick the tires on Odell Beckham, because he can field punts. But what about Devin Allen? Because he's a guy that I think does bring a little bit of a speed dynamic. Obviously, he's got some growing pains to go through, and I don't know how you do that on the practice squad, but is he somebody who could come into the picture midseason, do you think?
I mean, I suppose he could, Rick. But again, I think you have the same problem with Allen that you would with Covey or any other, player who is not familiar either with the NFL or returning punts. It is a challenging thing to do. There have only been, for instance, 32 punt return touchdowns in Eagles history. The Eagles have been around 89 years. If you see an Eagles player return a punt for a touchdown, it's like getting hit by a bolt of lightning, okay? And of the last 13 of them that have been returned for touchdowns, 11 of them were by the same four guys that I mentioned earlier: Westbrook, Sproles, Mitchell, and Jackson. So if you have a good one or a great one, that's awesome, but they're really hard to find. And it's hard to find even a guy who's really, really reliable. And I'm not sure that a guy like Devin Allen or Britton Covey, or even some of the guys who are already on the roster, who they talked about, Quez Watkins, guys like that, are all that reliable. So again, look, they're going to put somebody back there and it probably will be fine. But as I said, I just wanted to get people thinking about, hey, maybe there's another way to go about solving this problem. It's not unprecedented. It's happened in high school. It's happening more and more at the college level. And we have seen ideas from those levels of football bubbling up more to the NFL in the last 10 or 15 years. So I have a feeling, guys, you're going to see a team try it sometime in the not too distant future.
All right, last thing on punt returns, and I promise you we'll get to more important things with the Philadelphia Eagles. They do have one guy who just 2 years ago fielded 11 punts, one of which he took to the house, and averaged 21 yards per punt return. And his name is Devonte Smith. And no one ever mentions him. Why?
That's a good question, Jody. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to putting Devonte back there. Maybe they're concerned about wear and tear on him, even though Devonte has added some muscle and some size in the offseason. I don't know. And maybe it'll get to the point where they do put him back there. But, you know, it hasn't really come up, you know, very much so far during training camp and preseason.
Yeah, I might be the first to bring it up, that he had 11 punt returns as a senior, one of which he took to the house and averaged 20 yards per. That's pretty damn good.
It is good, and I would be much more open to someone like Devonte fielding punts than a guy whose only job and whose only reason for being in the NFL is fielding punts, right? Like, you're setting up a situation where you're almost like a kicker who's got the yips, you know, who's thinking about his future in the league every time he swings his leg. A guy like a Covey or a Devin Allen is, I would think, going to be thinking about it every single time he fields a punt. If I drop this one, if I muff it, if I fumble it, I may be gone tomorrow. So, you know, a guy like Devonte is a better option, I think.
Well, you know, I would love to see Devonta Smith back there. I'd also be nervous every time he is back there. And Jody, that probably goes back to our pre-draft conversation. I know he's bulked up, but maybe in the playoffs, that's the ace up the sleeve, and you just let him run through the playoff gauntlet. But speaking of Devonta Smith, Mike, I know you just recently wrote an article saying that Smith and AJ Brown could potentially be the greatest Eagles wide receiver duo in history, and it's hard to argue with that logic.
Yeah, look, I get it. They haven't played in a regular season game together yet, right? But look at their body of work so far in their NFL careers. You know, Devonte had a terrific rookie season, had nearly 1,000 yards receiving, was immediately the best skill position player the Eagles had. You know, might have had better numbers if Jalen Hurts had gotten off to a better start and the Eagles actually threw the ball more often in the second half of the season. And we all know what AJ Brown was, the kind of player he was in Tennessee. You know, there's a reason the Eagles gave up a first-round draft pick and another pick to go get him. And the thing about it, Rick, is that those guys can be together for a while. You know, AJ Brown is already signed to a long-term deal here. Devontae's only 1 year into his rookie deal. You know, you've got 2 or 3 years here where they're going to be on opposite sides of each other. And the other aspect of it too is that, you know, while the Eagles have had some terrific wide receivers in their history, it's been very rare that they've had 2 terrific ones at the same time. You know, you have Terrell Owens, who was great, and then you have on the other side you have Todd Pinkston. You had Mike Quick and Chris Carter entering the season together, but Quick got injured and Carter was going through his personal issues and drug addiction at the time. And so it never really materialized into becoming a great tandem. And then you could go back, you know, years earlier to Harold Carmichael and Howard Jackson. And, you know, if you want to consider Pete Retzlaff a wide receiver when he was playing with Tommy McDonald, but then we're really going into the Wayback Machine. So in the modern era, I think this has a chance to be the best duo that the Eagles have ever had. And it's certainly already, I think, one of the best pairings in the league.
All right, Mike, I want to get you out of the Wayback Machine and put you in the forward-looking machine. This season, 2022, NFC. If not the Eagles, then who? Because that's one of the reasons why I picked the Eagles to make it to the Super Bowl this year. It's that I don't love the NFC. The obvious teams have question marks. Thank you, Rams, for last night's opening night performance to help me make the argument. The Bucs and Brady maybe not being all committed, and offensive line coming apart at the seams, and Rodgers without his star wide receiver and his inability to win playoff games. If not the Eagles, then who in the NFC this year, Mike?
Well, I'll say this, Jody. I've written and said that on the one hand, it wouldn't completely surprise me if the Eagles made the Super Bowl because of the improvements they made in the offseason, the young players they've had who have developed in recent years, who they drafted from 2018 on, and if Jalen Hurts can take a step forward. That said, the gap between them, even as the NFC's last playoff team last year, and the other teams above them was fairly wide, fairly substantial. And that's going to be a lot of ground to make up. Is it possible that they can make it up? Yes. But is it likely? I'm not so sure. you're asking a team like the Packers, who have been really freaking good during the regular season under Matt LaFleur, to really take a step backward. You're asking the Rams, last night notwithstanding, to take a big step backward. You're asking the Buccaneers, who showed how much better they were than the Eagles in that playoff game, and even earlier in the regular season when they came into the Link and beat them pretty handily, to take a big step backward. So, even the 49ers, Trey Lance is going to have to be pretty lousy for them to regress as much as it will take for them to be, on par with or worse than the Eagles. So I'm not saying it can't happen. And it's certainly possible that the Eagles have improved themselves enough to catch up to those teams. But, right off the top, you're talking about leapfrogging 4 teams that were significantly better than the Eagles were last year.
So, Mike, I would argue they're not going to take significant steps backwards, but I would argue that each of those teams did somewhat regress. And then I take a look at what the Eagles did, especially on the defensive side, impact players at every level of the defense. Jordan Davis, Kaiser White, and Hassan Reddick in the second level. They added Bradbury. Then they trade for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. We mentioned AJ Brown. I don't know. Like, if you had told me that any other playoff team from a year ago added all those parts during the offseason, I think we'd be anointing them automatic Super Bowl participants. So why is the hesitancy? Is it Jalen Hurts? Is that the issue here?
It's Jalen Hurts. It's Jonathan Gannon. It's the challenges with assimilating new players, no matter how talented they are, into a team culture and setting and getting everybody on the same wavelength. That's what it comes down to, Rick. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Nobody's breaking any news by saying that the season will come down to Jalen Hurts and Jonathan Gannon. It's the most obvious thing. It's the truest thing about the Eagles. We've got to see what kind of scheme Gannon runs and deploys with the weapons at his disposal now. And we've got to see exactly how much improvement Jalen Hurts has made during the offseason. Can he stay in the pocket and throw the football? I took a lot of heat, for instance, after the first preseason game, the Eagles-Jets game, because that play where Hurts rolled out to his right and took that cheap shot from the Jets, to me, worried me a little bit. Not because Hurts took the cheap shot, but because Hurts fled the pocket so quickly. I would have preferred him standing in there and try to throw the ball down the field. And it seemed to me that he escaped a little early. And that said to me, okay, is he taking the steps forward? I think he is. It seems like he should. He has all the intangibles and the work ethic so that you would think he would if he could, but we've still got to see it. So, it's not just the acquisitions. The acquisitions are terrific. The Eagles, as you said, should be much better. But there's a big difference between should be and actually once the games start going.
All right, Mike, so let me get this straight. That drive that Jalen had, which ended with him with a perfect quarterback rating and a touchdown, that worried you because he held on to the ball too long? Okay, all right. You're a tough grader. I'll give you that.
Jody, I'm the guy, okay, in my family, when my wife and I and our 2 kids get the Christmas tree every year, I'm the guy who stands back and says, the star on top is a little crooked. We got to fix that. That one light is out. We got to fix that.
Just double checking on that one. I'm watching you.
Look, and here's the other thing too. And I say this in complete sincerity, like that is how I look at things, right? And I don't want to get caught up in the Eagles are going to be freaking awesome before we've played a game. Is it possible? Yes. In theory and based on the moves they've made, they should be excellent. I think they should win 12 games. But again, let's just see. And Jalen Hurts was not an elite quarterback last season. He was not. And it's going to take a significant step forward for him to enter into that category. So let's see.
All right, I'm going to ask you to be positive, but you don't have to be over the top. The Eagles have made changes. They brought in new players. Both Rick and I think that they've significantly stepped up while others have come back to them in the NFC. Of the newbies, many more on defense than on offense. Basically, it's only one on offense, but it's pretty damn big in AJ Brown, but some significant upgrades on defense as well. Who's going to be the guy that at the end of the season we go, well, that was their biggest addition. That really did change the dynamic of the team. Which of their new offseason additions will be the guy who moves the needle the most?
I think it's the obvious one. I think it's Hassan Reddick. I wrote about this the other day. He, to me, is the key to everything because he's going to be the indication to me about how much Jonathan Gannon changes, adjusts, tweaks his approach and how he plays schematically, right? Like last year, we saw it pretty much every week. He put the two safeties in the Jetro lot on Darien Street across from Lincoln Financial Field, and they wanted to keep everything in front of them, okay? Now, there's some discussion about whether that's actually how he wants to play or whether he can change things. I will say this. The Eagles didn't get a lot of sacks last season, and that was a big reason why they went out and got Reddick. But they did generate – there are numbers that indicate that they did generate decent pressure without blitzing much. So if Reddick is able to kind of wreak havoc as a pass rusher without Gannon having to blitz, that to me is going to be the telltale sign that they can be something really good because then you can kind of, feed two birds with the same seed, right? Like you can keep everything in front of you and still apply pressure to opposing quarterbacks, and that's ideal. So this to me comes down to Hassan Reddick. If he's able to, to be the disruptor that he was with the Cardinals and with the Panthers, then the Eagles are going to be in great shape.
Yeah, I saw that article that you had there with Gannon and Reddick being kind of tied at the hip in terms of Gannon's job security. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. What will you be keeping an eye on in this Lions matchup? Where are the Eagles going to win? Is it in the trenches? Because, Detroit had a pretty good offensive line before these injuries started to bite them. Now we got a couple guys up front for Detroit who are kind of banged up. Do you see them utilizing Jordan Davis in this matchup? How much does he play? What does that defensive line rotation look like? How do they beat this line? I don't know if you saw Hard Knocks. There's a lot of Lions hype. But the Eagles took them to the woodshed last year. So do you see more of the same, or do you see a more competitive matchup?
Honestly, Rick, I just finished writing this in a column that's going to be online tomorrow before I came on with you guys. I think you're 100% right about the Lions hype. I think it has kind of warped the way people, especially in and around Philadelphia, are looking at this game. The Lions were 3-13 last year. Jared Goff is their starting quarterback, okay? If they beat the Eagles Sunday, it should be a shock to everybody. The Lions aren't that good, and they have those injuries along the offensive line. The Eagles should be pressuring Jared Goff all the time, and if they're not, then something's gone wrong here. I think the inside look or the perception of inside look that Hard Knocks gives us on an NFL team kind of warps the way we look at that team. And we hear Dan Campbell, delivering these speeches about, it's like an ocean and you got these teams that are in the shallows that are coming after you. I mean, the metaphor was so tortured that I think the United Nations are going to investigate it.
Oh,
I mean, it was just, it was kind of silly. And like, guys, they're still the Lions and the Eagles are better. And if this game is close, it's not going to reflect real well on the Eagles. It's going to say, okay, maybe they need to sort some stuff out here early in the season. The Eagles should win this game.
Hard Knocks should make you a fan of the team. It shouldn't warp the reality when they're not that good a team and the Lions are not that good a team. You and I see this exactly the same, Mike. All right. Year 2 of the Nick Sirianni coached Philadelphia Eagles and his staff, some of which in coordinator positions for the first time. So how much does year number 1 make them better, if at all, in year number 2 in their jobs?
I think it does make them better. Maybe I'm seeing something that's not there, Jody, but every time I listen to Sirianni speak to us now, there just seems a relative kind of confidence and assurance about himself that I didn't pick up on his first year. And he did a decent job his first year. They were 9-8. They got into the playoffs. They were 2-5 and going nowhere. And yeah, the schedule got easier in the second half of the season. But what would we be saying if they had lost more of those games than just the stinker they laid against the Giants in East Rutherford? So I think they're going to be, as a staff, better. I'm sure Eagles fans watched some of, the real hardcore fans anyway, watched some of Jeff Stoutland's interaction with the media yesterday. As long as the Eagles have that guy coaching their offensive line, they're going to be in good shape. I think he's the best position coach in the NFL, or at least one of them.
Sure.
So, look, is it a kind of a prove-it year for Sirianni and his staff? In some ways it is. If Jalen Hurts doesn't take the steps forward that everybody agrees he needs to take, Jeffrey Lurie tends not to be very patient with a head coach who can't develop a quarterback the way Jeffrey Lurie would want. Go back and look at his history. You know, Andy Reid gets Donovan McNabb. Andy Reid is here with Donovan for 10 years. Donovan gets traded. Andy gets 3 years, and then he's fired. Chip Kelly never had a settled situation at quarterback. Were there other issues with Chip? Yeah, of course there were. But the unsettled nature of the position led to him lasting less than 3 years. Doug Peterson gets Carson Wentz, and they win a Super Bowl. But as soon as the Carson Wentz situation falls apart, Doug Peterson is out of here. So Nick Sirianni should be mindful of that. You know, they may decide to move on from Jalen Hurts based on his performance this season. But Sirianni is only going to get one more shot to work with another quarterback, I would bet, before Jeffrey Lurie says, okay, maybe Nick's not the guy. So, you know, that's the history. But for now, I think Nick Sirianni, you kind of have to feel fairly good about him and the trajectory he's on as a head coach.
Well, I think that confidence has also trickled down to Jalen Hurts, and it's a big make it or break it, prove it season for him. And you mentioned the continuity year 2 in the system, first time, I think, since going back to high school. So, Mike, let me ask you, is it just based on performance? Is it based on results, or results and performance? You mentioned guys like Jimmy G, Jared Goff, guys that have gone to the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl, and then their teams look to jettison. Is Jalen Hurts, like, if he goes out and wins a playoff game or two, I would imagine that's your quarterback. But if it's not done impressively, does he still warrant that long-term deal?
This, to me, is the question that defines the 21st century NFL, Mike. Or Rick, excuse me. I'm referring to myself. This, to me, is the defining question of the league. In that, at what point, when you are a team, do you commit to a franchise, quote unquote, quarterback? Because giving too much money to the wrong guy is just as big a mistake or just as big a problem as not having the guy. You know, we saw that with the Ravens once they committed to Joe Flacco. We saw that with the Giants in the latter years of Eli Manning's career after he had won the 2 Super Bowls. You hamstring yourself if you give a quarterback who can't carry you to a Super Bowl an awful lot of money, because it's harder to build up a team around him. The big reason, one of the big reasons that the Eagles have been able to make the acquisitions they made this offseason and improve themselves as they have, is that Jalen Hurts is only costing them, what, 1.9 under the salary cap this year? If you give him a big contract, it inherently becomes more difficult to build a better team around him. So, look, this is a tough call for them, and they're going to be scouting quarterbacks this season. At the same time, they're going to be watching Jalen and seeing how he performs. So to answer your question, I don't know. I think there's a real gray area here where the team does well, but they're doing well, you know, kind of not necessarily in spite of Jalen Hurts, but independently of how Jalen Hurts is playing. And man, that's going to lead to a tough decision moving forward for this team. It really is.
Not going to go over well with Eagle Nation if Ian Book is the starter for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2023. All right. Yeah, I'm skipping over the rest of this year, going to next year for a more important question than whether Ian Book's going to be playing or not. Who's going to be the Eagles' starting center game 1, 2023?
Cam Jurgens, I think.
You think Kelsey's walking away?
I think so. Look, I don't have any inside intel on this. Jason, you know, knows a lot of people in the media, has tended to be very open with us about how he weighs whether to return and, you know, whether to retire. But I also wonder if I don't know this, I'm just guessing. I wonder if he looks at Jurgens and says, okay, they finally got the guy who has good hands, and I can leave the position in good hands with this kid. And therefore I can walk away. It wouldn't surprise me if Jason were thinking that way, just knowing a little bit about him as a person. So if I were betting, I would say this is probably his last year. But again, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, I can remember being in the locker room of the Superdome after the Eagles lost to the Saints in the playoffs in 2019, after Alshon Jeffrey dropped that pass from Nick Foles, and they had a chance to go to the NFC Championship game. And Jason was really kind of weighing it then and talked very openly about how he wasn't sure if he was going to come back. And then he came back again. So let's see. But if I were betting, I'd say, yeah, this is probably the last year that Jason Kelce is playing for the Eagles.
Interesting, Mike. So with that being said, let me ask you this, since you've spent significant time around Jason, I have not. would you see him? Because I think he would be an outstanding coach. He'd also be an entertaining media personality. Do you think he gets into one of those endeavors, or does he just take some time off? What's next for Jason Kelce beyond the gridiron?
You know, I don't know, Rick. He's a smart guy. He's got a lot going on upstairs, and I think emotionally too. I think if he wanted to coach, he'd be terrific at it. He may not want to do that. He may not want to do that. I know his wife works with children who are on the autism spectrum, and maybe that's something that he'd want to dive into with her. I don't know. You know, I get along pretty well with him, I think. And as I said, he gets along well with a lot of people who cover the team. He understands the importance of those kinds of relationships. Maybe the media is something that would appeal to him, but I'd just be speculating. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that Jason Kelce could do, and he'd be pretty good at them.
Yeah, if I got along with him, that ended today when I called him on the carpet for trying to curb the expectations of the Eagles, then doing a hype video and saying, we're going to prove to you that we're the best. So, yeah, I don't think Jason is talking to me right now. No, but I'm glad you're talking to me, Sielski. So we've got you. Eagles win Sunday against Detroit, and if it's close, shame on the Eagles that they should win this one handily. See it the same there. You've got the Eagles making the playoffs, but the teams that were ahead of them last year, you can't in good conscience put the Eagles ahead of them just yet. You might do that by the time the playoffs roll around, but not just yet. How many games the Eagles going to win? They're going to win the division. Give us your in-season, regular season prediction on the Philadelphia Eagles accomplishments.
I think 12-5 is a reasonable expectation, Jody. I do. I think they should win the division. I think the Cowboys' injuries are going to hurt them. You know, that there's always something going on with that team. Look, the Commanders and the Giants, you know, they are what they are. You know, something is going to happen with Carson Wentz at some point this season, and there will be drama because there always is. And the Giants just aren't very good. They're still rebuilding. So I think the Eagles should win the division. How far they go in the playoffs, we'll see. It depends who they draw, depends on health and who's around and all that. I picked the Packers to come out of the NFC, but that's me.
12-5. Does that include 6-0 in division?
5-1.
Okay. Yeah, I got them going 6-0. But we'll see if that plays itself out. Mike, always a pleasure. Feel free to spread the word that Devonte Smith should be running back punts, not nobody, between now and
just let the ball roll, Jody. Come to the dark side.
No. Let's see. And yes, Saratella and I are old enough. You're close to remember Jason Sehorn returning a kick for the Giants, and his career was never the same thereafter. So I get what you're risking by doing that. I would do it for Devonte Smith.
Jody, look at it this way. There's a line in Moneyball by Brad Pitt / Billy Beane where he's telling his players, right, if the other team bunts, just pick the ball up and throw it to first base. Don't try to be a hero. They're giving you an out. Take it. The same thinking should apply to punts. They're giving you the ball back. Just take it. Don't mess it up.
All right. Sielski going all Moneyball on us. I appreciate that. Mike, a pleasure, buddy. Thanks much for hopping on. We're going to have you on during the season as well. Thanks for doing it today.
Jody, Rick, thanks so much, guys. Have a great weekend.
Good.